Welcome back to the farm. Today we're going to make some chicken feeders. Now I got a couple different sizes of containers here that we will turn into chicken feeders. Standard 5-gallon bucket here, that'll hold about 30 pounds of feed. 15-gallon barrel, they're not real common, but if you look hard enough you can find them. This will hold about 70 pounds of food, which is really nice because then you can buy 50-pound bags, dump it in, and then refill as necessary without having to store a 50-pound bag of food. And then this is the size that I use, the 55-gallon drum, which will hold about 300 pounds of food. The things we'll need for today's project are a closet flange. This is about $3.50 at the hardware store. This one is a 4x4 hub. This is a 45-degree street elbow for sewer. Now there is a difference in PVC fittings. The sewer elbows and pipes are smaller than the standard PVC, thinner walls. If you cannot find a street elbow, a standard elbow will be fine, and then you will need pipe to connect the elbows together. And then a 90-degree elbow, also for sewer. You will want some sort of PVC cement. This one is a single stage, which will be sufficient for what we're doing. We'll want a screwdriver, some sort of drill bit, just anything to start a hole for a sawzall. You'll want some screws to attach this to the bucket or barrel, whatever you're going to use, and then a short section of sewer pipe. And you also want a sawzall or a jigsaw of some sort. You also need some lumber. The size lumber you need will depend on which size feeder you decide to make. Let's get on to the project. So, we will start with the 5-gallon bucket. And the reason I chose this particular size of closet flange is because the 4-inch sewer elbow will fit perfectly inside of there like that. And we need that in order for this to work properly. Now the first thing we're going to do is we have our bucket upside down. We're going to take our closet flange, set it down on top of the bucket, and then we will trace around the outside of the closet flange, and then we will just put a hole in. Now we're just going to take a pocket knife or any sort of sharp knife. Razor blade works too. We're going to clean up the edges here. And we are going to anchor it down into the bottom of the bucket. Alright, you can see I put 4 screws in there just to hold it in place. The next step we're going to do is we are going to glue our fittings into our closet flange. So we're just going to use a single step PVC glue and just push them together. Alright, now that this piece is set, we're going to glue this piece onto it. So now that we got that glued in, we have a feeder. You can just take this out, hang it, fill it with food. I prefer to have it on stands, so we are going to add legs to this thing. Now what you will need is a few pieces of basic lumber. These are just some 1x3 furring strips that I picked up at the hardware store. I cut them down to 16 inches. I measured from here to the highest point on the elbow and I got about 8 inches. And what we're going to do is we're going to measure 8 inches on our furring strip, each one, so that we put them all on evenly. We're going to go from the inside and screw it into place. And try to keep the legs as perpendicular to the bucket as possible. One leg, test just to make sure it'll sit high enough. And this is plenty high enough. And then we will add the other 2 legs. I put screws in kind of down here and then one up here so you have a nice stable lever there. And we're going to try to make this in thirds. Doesn't have to be perfect. It's just a chicken feeder. And there we go. We have a chicken feeder. Now if you want, you can get a lid for it. Your chickens may want to perch on here, so a lid might not be a bad idea. But total spent on this was about $13. You have a feeder that is capable of holding 30 pounds of food. So let's move on to the next size. The next size up is this 15-gallon drum. It holds about 70 pounds of food, which means you can dump 50 pounds in. When you get down to about 20 pounds, you can dump another 50 pounds in. So you can buy food when you get low. dump it in, and you don't have to try to store food anywhere. So it may be worth your effort to see if you can locate one of these. I think I paid about $5 for this one. You'll notice there is no open top on this. It is fully sealed. So what we'll have to do is we'll have to cut the top off of this. All right, we got the top cut off. Now it's basically the same process as the 5-gallon bucket, where we have to put a hole in the bottom for the closet flange and glue everything together. Now we're going to put it in the bottom so we can screw it in place. All right, now the closet flange is in place. We're going to glue our 45-degree elbow in, and then glue our 90-degree into the 45 like we did with the 5-gallon bucket. For the legs for this one, I went with a 2x2 furring strip, a little bit thicker, a little more robust. We are dealing with a little more weight. I also cut it to 24 inches instead of 16 because I'd like to get up the side of the barrel just a little bit farther for a little more stability. And again, I'm going to measure. Make sure that your legs are longer than this. So we're 7, so I'll just do 8 just to be on the safe side. And I'll do it on all 3 of my legs. And again, we're going to just place it on here and get a couple screws into it. I'm going to be putting 3 screws in it just for a little extra strength. Alright, there we go. We have a 50-pound chicken feeder. And again, this cost, it's about $10 for the PVC fittings, about $5 for the barrel, about $1.50 I think for these 2x2 furring strip for the legs, and it's all set. Now something you can do for a lid for the 15-gallon drum is the top you cut off, it isn't perfectly round. It did move a little simply because that's what happens. And you can set it on 90 degrees to where you took it off, and that seems to work okay. Or you can even set it on exactly where you took it off. You could also add a hinge to it so you can flip it up and then close it. I don't have any hinges with me to show you that, but pretty simple. You find a hinge that'll fit here, run a couple of screws into the plastic, and you're good to go. Just don't be too rough with it. Now on to our 300-pound feeder, the 55-gallon drum. If you can get food grade barrels, that's ideal, but you don't need food grade barrels. Just check what was in them, and whatever was in them, rinse it out real good before you use it as a feeder, not that anything that was in them is now in the food. As you pick them, make sure you find one that's got a fairly flat bottom, doesn't have a heavy ridge in it, unless you only plan on having 2 spouts, but on a 55-gallon drum, I'd recommend 3 or 4. I'm going to put 3 in, but 4 is what I actually have in my chicken coop, but 3 would be sufficient. So let's cut the top off of this one and then start making our feeder out of it. When I cut the top off, I'm going to cut along inside this ridge here, and then what we can do is we can take that top and flip it over, and there's a lip down inside of here. When we flip it over, that'll rest perfectly onto the top of the barrel, so we have a built-in lid. As you can see, this sits right on top, and you have a lid. So we're going to space them out as evenly as possible. And you want to make sure that this doesn't go over the edge, but you want it fairly close to the edge, but not all the way out to the edge. Time to add the legs. I had some 2x6 lumber sitting around. I had 8-foot sticks, so I cut that down into 32-inch pieces. Lots of support for all this weight. And 300 pounds is a lot of weight. I also added a piece of 2x4 at the end here. That way the edge of the barrel can rest here, so not all the weight is on the screws through the plastics. Some of the weight will be on here. So let's get these installed. One last thing I'd like to mention is pick up a short section of pipe. If you get the sewer fittings like I used, make sure you get sewer pipe because regular PVC will not fit in the sewer fittings. If you get regular PVC fittings, then make sure you get regular PVC pipe. You only need a short section of it, depends on which feeder you make. Because what happens is, when the food is down in here, sometimes the chickens, as they eat, they'll pull the food out. It'll spill on the ground and they'll just leave it. So they waste quite a bit of food. So what I did to combat that, I cut a 4-inch section of this and stuck it in. Now, I would recommend that you not glue it in right away, simply because once it's glued in, it's there. So what I found, 4-inch works pretty well, but you may need a different size depending on what fittings you end up with. Test different sizes, see what works the best. They have to be able to reach in and get their food, but you also don't want them making a mess on the floor. And this applies to all sizes of feeders. We have our 3 feeders built now. So this feeder here was about $14 plus a little bit of lumber that I had laying around. So let's just say it's $15. You can put about 30 pounds of feed in this and it works well. You can hang it or put it on legs, up to you. This one here was about the same price, maybe a couple dollars more, depends on what you spend on the barrel. And this one holds about 70 pounds of feed, which is convenient because then you can just dump a 40 or 50 pound bag in and leave it for a while. You don't have to store a bag, so you just get a bag here and there and dump it in, top it off. This one here does 300 pounds and it costs about 3 times as much as the other one, so we're looking $40, $45, depends on what you pay for the barrel. But in the end, it's nice if you have more chickens, so you don't have to build as many of these. You can build one of these, and this will hold 300 pounds. So you can get 250 pounds at a time and just dump it in, and then leave it for a while. So, there you go. Thanks for watching, and until next time, keep on farming.